All right, y'all. Hello and welcome to Colonial Outcast, the anti-imperialist podcast that your uncle will hate. We don't really do short form videos. We usually just do the podcast episodes, but we're going to be branching out today because one of the most atrocious headlines I've seen in a long time has just come to fruition. And let me tell you guys, anti-Semitism is finally coming to Haaretz, Israel's often reviled by the majority of the population left-wing newspaper. To call Haaretz left-wing though is kind of absurd. So what's got everybody hot, bothered, and shocked right now? Well, it's the fact that apparently the Israeli army is using civilians, Gazan civilians, Palestinians, as human bomb detectors. They even dress them up in IDF fatigues. This is not a policy of a rogue company commander. The higher ranks know this is an unwritten practice. And I have some Palestinian American friends who would say, yeah, they've been doing this for years. This is nothing new. They hide behind children in West Bank when they go into Jenin, the refugee camp, and other places, because they're big, brave, most moral army of the world boys. But this is just indicative of, this is such a horrifying practice that Israeli media, which is still Zionist, even though it's liberal, is finally having to report on this. So I just want to get into this and spend like 5-10 minutes on it. So they're using Palestinians to inspect potentially booby-trapped tunnels in Gaza. This is not the first time this was reported. This was reported back in December, but it was not like a big Haaretz breaking news inspection piece. So, well, one of the quotes that they're leading with from one of their sources is, "Our lives are more important than their lives." Well, obviously they think that. Obviously soldiers in war zones, and I'm not saying this is a war, obviously universally believe that. But this is a whole new level of dark effed upness. So Gazans not suspected of terrorism are detained and sent as human shields to search tunnels and houses before IDF soldiers enter. With full knowledge of senior officers, several sources say. And Haaretz, for his atrociously apologist for genocide as it is still like a completely legitimate news organization. I think they do some good reporting, and some of their op-eds are good. I still think they're apologists for some of the most heinous war crimes imaginable, and they still play the victim, which is absurd. But according to this investigation piece, these Gazans that are not affiliated with terrorism are usually wearing Israeli army uniforms. So they dress them up as Israeli army. So if it's not just bombs in the tunnels, if it's resistance fighters, they'll shoot them, right? And many of them are in their 20s. So they're of fighting age. They look like military age males. They're in Israeli uniforms, and they're always with Israeli soldiers of various ranks. So this is kind of ironic because remember, the huge narrative was like Hamas doesn't wear, uniforms, and so we can't tell them from the civilians because they want to hide amongst the civilian population and get us to kill civilians. Well, they're taking civilians and putting them in military fatigues. Like, no sense of irony at all. So apparently they wear sneakers because obviously the IDF will have a big surplus of combat fatigues, but not necessarily boots. Their hands are cuffed behind their backs so they can't resist. Their faces are, full of fear, obviously, because they're walking into tunnels to get blown up. The soldiers call each of them shawish. Sorry, my Arabic is non-existent. An obscure Arabic word of Turkic origin meaning sergeant. So they're kind of like talking down to them. They can go ahead, sergeant. Go into the tunnel and get blown up. This guy thinks he's a sergeant. I hate these guys. Random Palestinians have been used by Israeli army units in the Gaza Strip for one purpose: to serve as human shields for soldiers during operations. So they said it. They said it there in writing. And just going through this article, one of the things is this unofficial policy? Well, this article says yes. It probably started as just some rogue commander, authorizing this, and then slowly over the course of months, it became normalized. And now the top brass knows about it and they agree with the philosophy because they're Zionist maniacs. And they're like, yeah, that seems reasonable. We are the chosen people. These are all, if they're not terrorists, they're part of the problem because it takes a village. So, according to one of the senior sources, the senior ranks know about it. The army has played innocent despite footage shown on Al Jazeera about 2 months ago. Yeah, this is not the first time this exact story has surfaced since October. Israeli soldiers can be seen dressing Palestinian detainees in uniforms and flak jackets, putting cameras on them, sending them into badly damaged houses and tunnel entrance with their hands bound by plastic ties. Okay, so I was in special operations in Ranger Regiment, and it's not just special operations process, but it's also regular army. Who usually does this is the canine unit, German shepherds, trained in bomb detection. They can smell HME, homemade explosives, improvised explosives, and they have cameras attached to them. So this is what you generally use dogs for. They're just using Palestinians. I'm not going to comment on the implications of that because it's not complete. It's not necessary at all. So apparently, according to this investigation, the Americans are furious, states Haaretz. A State Department spokesman has said that the Israeli Defense Forces is investigating the incident and that the evidence in the videos does not reflect the IDF's values and violates rules and regulations. Does it, though, if it's a widespread problem, wide enough to warrant a Haaretz piece on it? So when I saw the report from Al Jazeera, oh, yes, it's true. A combat soldier in a conscript IDF brigade who took part in the use of Gazans as human shields told Haaretz. And when I saw the IDF's response, which totally doesn't reflect reality, it's done with the knowledge of the brigade commander, at least. So brigade commander, that's usually a colonel, right? I've brained up so much military knowledge. Brigade commander, what rank? Brigade commander rank, a colonel or a brigadier general. So a one-star general potentially. Yeah, and I think this was the footage. So let's take a look. So yeah, they dressed him in sneakers. Got the flak jacket, the camera. He's attached to a rope. Wow, he's being forced? Now he's being forced to walk barefoot through destroyed civilian houses, hands tied together. So I guess they're upping their game to look better, and they're clothing them now. So, oh boy, and it's interesting, right? Because Haaretz has published that footage, so I guess they're being forced to actually come to terms with what's happening here. Palestinians, and there's also been a precedent, right? Because Palestinians were also used as human shields in 2002's Operation Defensive Shield again on West Bank. Like this is it's against rules and regulations, but it's always happened. It's happened for over 20 years, and at this point, what is there to say? Now, I don't think anything's going to come of this. I was talking to some like anti-Zionist sources in Israel or who had lived in Israel, and the main population is so detached from what Haaretz puts out, and like Mariv, TV, Ynet News is really not. Maybe the Times of Israel is going to play this with more watered down language, but yeah, it's not going to be something people pay attention to, and it's going to be a big nothing burger of a story, I think, because like, look, people came out in force to defend the the Israeli soldiers' right to rape civilians. I don't think this is going to change it. If they're going to fight and storm military bases to defend those people, what are they going to do about this? It's looking very bleak and very grim, and the U.S. will say we're waiting for an investigation. But just something to keep in mind, to tell your uncle that's happening, and see what he says. So more on this story if it develops, but it's just so egregious as a former like soldier that I had to just make it come on here and make a 10-minute video just to spread awareness in case you missed this news story. So yeah, and plus we had taken like 2 weeks about not talking to Palestine, and that was too big of a break. So here we are. We're back at it, and I'll see you guys on the next one.